Therapists, what was your I need a minute moment? The time I had to clean a bloody bathroom scene where an incredibly disturbed girl had self-harmed herself throughout our recreation complex. A local grade 4 class from a neighboring school used our pool, so it had to get cleaned that night. I needed a fucking month actually. Did that girl end up passing, or did she make it by some miracle? Nope. Made it. Always made it. Came close through various techniques about a dozen times, and the workers saved her every time. First internship on my path to counselor, and I was working in funeral home under the grief counselor there. Grief and trauma is my focus. We were taught to be strong and supportive to those grieving, of course, and if we needed to cry, go in the back or to the bathroom. I escorted an elderly lady to view her husband before the service. I helped sit her in the chair in front of the casket and was standing behind her when she stood up and laid on the casket, bawling her eyes out, declaring how much she loved him, missed him, and begging him to come back and not to leave her. That totally destroyed me. I immediately started crying behind her. She stood up, and I sucked it up to help her walk back into the hall to start greeting guests. I thought I had done a good job collecting myself, but my mentor took one look at me and softly said, "Go to the back room," which I did. I completely lost it for a few minutes, cleaned up and went back to help with the service. I definitely needed that minute. I usually need a breather after working with my victims of SA. The pain and tears in my room are always so heavy and raw. Edit to add, as an intern, I saw a client for a few weeks. Extremely suicidal. Stopped coming out of the blue. Literally my first client ever. Wife came to be seen as a patient a few weeks later, and the receptionist hurried back and warned me her husband, my client, had died by suicide, and now she wanted to be seen. Her description of the event and how her daughters found out was absolutely horrific. It was a lot to take in as a new therapist. I'm no longer in mental health, but I was a mental health professional in a big city jail for years. I had a few moments where I needed to take an extended bathroom break to compose myself. Breaks were not allowed outside of lunch. I had one person admit to molesting his very small children and tell me he thought it was what they wanted. Had another confess to a brutal murder, every Greystone detail, with a straight face. Another who would routinely dig up his mother's grave to put her in different clothes, and one who murdered his abuser. That job was nuts and made me realize how you never really know anyone or why they do anything. I was so burnt out I left the field altogether. It sucks because I know that's my calling, but I'm too old to go back to school for a master's now. Do you report that kind of shit when they tell you about it? Yes, I would notate their file with everything they would tell me. Never got cashed to court though, surprisingly. I know there's a lot of weird and or bad things there, but what really got me was the one who changed his mother's clothes posthumously. Did he worry she would be upset by the smell? I just can't figure it out. He explained it by saying he promised he'd always take care of her and that she didn't want to wear the same clothes in life. Why would she in death? It was very sad. I felt so bad for that guy. He very clearly had mental illness compounded my heavy drug use. They ended up not telling him where they reburied his mom after the third time. He snapped and dug up other graves trying to find her. He got a bit of time for that. Not a therapist but social worker who works with traumatized children. We got this underage girl who was raised by a mother suffering of Munchausen by proxy syndrome, which essentially means the mother pretends that her child is sick to get attention and the pity of people. This goes as far as poisoning her own child or even mutilate it to have a reason to seek doctors. The mother in question was incredibly abusive even when her daughter got taken away from her. For some reason, officials never took child custody from her, which made it easy to have influence on her daughter's life. She specifically used it to tell her daughter that she loved her and she will always be there for her, but every time shit actually hit the fan and she needed to be there, she wasn't. One day her daughter got pregnant, but the child died within a few days, so an abortion needed to be done ASAP to prevent pregnancy poisoning. All she needed to do was granting permission by email, but although I called her several times and she assured me she would send it, it just never came. Her daughter was forced to have her dead unborn child in her womb for 3 days for the sole reason that her mother just didn't do anything. We finally reached out to CPS and got permission through them, but her daughter was deeply traumatized by this and just never recovered from it. Seeing her like this was my first I need a minute moment. Had an adult client whose evil dad would buy them a pet. They were a kid when this happened, and then proceed to torture the animal in front of them or would set it free in the middle of a field just to hurt them. I once worked in a crisis intervention service. A 38-year-old mother of 2 called me up, saying she was planning to hang herself. This was nothing new for the client. This happened around once per month, usually when she was refused contact with her 2 young kids due to her douche of an ex. Usually, I would call 999 and the police would arrive at her home and take her neck out of the noose. She would always kick the stool away when the police were within 20 seconds of rescuing her. I kept her on the line and kept her calm as I contacted the cops. They were there within 5 minutes. She heard them come up her stairs, so jumped from the stool. However, she forgot to unlock the security lock on her heavy fire door. The 2 cops first on scene were 2 small females, thus were unable to break the door down. I heard her choke and gargle on speakerphone. I could hear her breathing. It took around 20 minutes for the cops to break though. I heard her make her last sound after 5 minutes. This still haunts me. Holy shit, I'm sorry. That's horrid and so fucking sad. So sad, buddy. And it doesn't matter how many times it happens, you never become desensitized. I had to take 4 weeks off after this happened. I still think about her 2 young children 4 years later. She was a victim of childhood abuse, adult rape, depression, domestic violence, and drug use. If anything, it makes me reflect that I once thought I had a tough life. My life is a holiday in comparison to people like this poor lady. I only wish I could have done more. Client who lost her husband talking about how due to a miscommunication at the hospital she thought she'd have time to say goodbye before he passed away, taken off ventilator, but when she came back into the room he had died and she wasn't there for him dying. Everyone got to say goodbye except her. She loved him so much and it totally broke my heart. All of her story was so sad, so this was icing on the cake really. I worked in child and adolescent crisis before my current job. I could tell a lot of stories, but the one that still really sticks with me is this. If you're not familiar with crisis units in the hospital, they have CCTV so security guards can watch multiple patients simultaneously to monitor behavior for safety. I'm working a crisis case of a 12-year-old male after a few years at the same hospital. The child had been aggressive towards staff, broke a crisis worker's nose, so he'd been put in 4-point restraints. Don't even get me started on that human rights violation. One of the guards comes to me and says, "I think you need to see this." He pulls up a screen recording and there's a video of mom putting her hand down the child's pants, gesticulating her hand inside his pants, then pulling her hand back out after a few strokes. And then, a few minutes later, the same thing. I call CPS, they come down, watch the videos. I call his long-term mental health therapist and say, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but we saw mom molesting child on video." Therapist screams, "I knew it, I knew she was molesting him." We call dad down, who hasn't been in the kid's life much. He says he got chased away by mom for a lot of reasons, but one of them was that he got creeped out by things mom would say and do. For instance, mom allegedly told him she was attracted to girlish-looking boys with long hair, which just about summed up the child. Mom is asked about the incidents and says that she wasn't molesting the child, says that the child has a tic and needs his balls moved sometimes to stop the tic. He couldn't get the tic himself because of being in restraints, so she just did it for him. Twice. CPS found that an acceptable excuse and ruled the case unfounded. I don't know what was worse, watching the videos or hearing that CPS watched the same videos as me and said, "Yeah, that's okay." I worked with a veteran, and he was talking about his experience in, redacted just in case. He told me about how one time, they got orders to attack a bus, because there might be a high-value target on it. So he said they absolutely blew the shit out of the bus with bullet holes. He said that the bus looked like scrap metal by the time they were done, and everyone in the bus was very obviously mutilated and dead, women, children, and men. Turns out there was no high-value target, and they just murdered these people. He said that there was one man that was hanging out of the bus, with his pants ripped off, and he had a 12-inch dick. His response after looking over the bus with his squad was, "What a waste of a huge cock," and that he and his squad mates, whatever the term is, all laughed about it and moved along. He said that when he hangs out with them now years later, they look back on that story as one of the funniest times in their career. The thing that got me was that he truly did think it was a funny experience, and he did not care about the people they killed. I wasn't sure what to say, or how to respond. The lack of empathy revealed a lot to me, and just the horrors of war and brainwashing that goes into making a soldier and turning them into killing machines, and the squad mentality that they have no one to be accountable to except each other. No remorse. Not a therapist, but I used to be a school social worker. We had 2 students who were murdered by their dad. The next day a student told me that she knew they were being abused, but didn't tell a single person, so she broke down in my office, blamed herself for them getting murdered because she didn't tell anyone they told her they were getting abused. The next day this student had a suicide attempt. The next week the schools shut down because of COVID. I attempted to follow up with her remote and checked in, but a month into the schools being closed I lost contact with this student. I still think of her every day and hope she's doing alright. I would say my therapist moment was when a 10-year-old child described to me in vivid detail how his mom's boyfriend locked him in a dog kennel and brutally stabbed his mom to death right in front of him, took her body to the woods, and threatened to kill him if he told someone. I still see this client and I work on helping him work through the grief and emotion processing, as well as building coping skills. He's still super young, but I worry that he's going to get some unhealthy coping skills to cope with this trauma. Oh my God, humans can be disgusting. Hope the kid manages to have a stable life eventually. He has an amazing family that took him in. They bend over and will do anything for that child. He goes to therapy weekly, sees his school counselor, is in a support group. His family is also open to new ideas to help him. I think he will be okay because of the support he has. Once had a client with a child who did nothing but scream at the parent for about 20 to 30 minutes straight. As soon as they left, I cried for 20 minutes due to how emotionally charged the words and accusations were. I tried to diffuse it at times, but it continued to rebound quickly. Therapist here. I worked in a county jail for several years. I mostly did assessments in booking, so I saw people freshly arrested. Some were high on drugs, some unmedicated mentally ill, gangbangers, you name it, I've seen it. One case was a woman in her 40s, who was trafficked from Asia in her teens for sex, addicted to meth, with a man who beat her constantly. She was arrested for domestic violence. Had visible bruises on her person. I sat with her for a while as she recounted the years of abuse by this man. She cried. I offered her support, validation, resources in the community, and told her I would check in with her the following day. She reached for my hand and said thank you through her tears. After I sat with her, I went to my office and cried. A guttural, raw cry indicating that something had stirred within me. I was in a physically abusive relationship years earlier that I thought I had processed and overcome. And I worked with many women who were victims of domestic violence over the years, but something about her story and the way she said thank you, she had not shared much of her experience with anyone, stayed with me. I was still not done dealing with my own trauma from being in an abusive relationship. I went back to therapy shortly after seeing this woman. I hope she's out there, doing well and safe. Not a therapist, but I'm a first-year school counselor. I've listened to a lot of heavy stuff, but probably one of the worst was a 4th grade boy telling me about how his shithead dad beat the crap out of him and his younger siblings and poured hot sauce in their mouths. I kept it together in front of the child but wept in the car on my way home. Sometimes it's impossible to fathom how monstrous and evil some people can be. Did you call CPS? CPS was already involved. Otherwise, yes, of course I would have. When I was a kid I went to therapy. I asked my therapist if she felt like I deserved what happened to me. She stepped out of the room, came back and a few minutes later clearly having had cried. She then said, "No, you did not deserve it." I'll never forget it. I felt terribly sorry for upsetting her, but now I better understand. I hope she is well. I worked as a therapist at a substance use agency before going into private practice. One of my biggest I need a moment times happened there. I was working with a young individual, and I myself was around their age, who was addicted to meth. They were bright, intelligent, and deeply empathetic to the world but so sick. Had to have not just 1 open heart surgeries due to cardiomyopathy, but 2, prior to ever turning 30. Just kept relapsing despite trying so hard. This client never missed treatment. Didn't show for an appointment so I called. Didn't answer. They called back and asked to speak to me. I will never forget the voice when I answered. They were so broken. They had just relapsed before calling and injected meth into their PICC line that was treating another heart infection. They were so afraid and disappointed. I remember thinking that their addiction was going to kill them and it weighed so heavily on me. I will never forget this client. After that call I sat there awash in the realization that my client would likely die from this and they were my age. Addiction can turn people all out of character, but they were so sweet and kind, would give you the shirt off their back. I truly believe they were just too kind for this harsh world. But, this was a while ago. Client went to a higher level of care and I found out over a year later they were sober and doing well and had moved states. I remember crying when I found out they made it all that time later. This is pretty early on in my career, when I was working with a clinic. I had a patient who was a bit younger, around 19 to 20. I won't go into details about her situation, but she would occasionally experience symptoms of depression and anxiety. We had a great rapport going and she always seemed happy to see me, and would joke around with me. We probably worked together for about a few months, and everything was going quite well. She was able to manage her moods and could deal with anxiety better, and was functioning quite well. One day, she said that she needed to take a couple months off for a move. She scheduled her follow-up appointment, and I knew she had our emergency number and whatnot, so I wasn't too worried. When she missed our follow-up appointment, I was a bit curious, it wasn't the first time, and sent her an email to check in. Her parents responded that she had passed away, and while they didn't go into great detail, it sounded like she was a victim of suicide. It would be my first real experience of anything like that, and I was absolutely devastated. She was on my mind for a long time. I went over my notes, I would retrace every conversation, trying to figure out if I had missed something. I was also in counseling during this time. It was a part of our work for new therapists, and my counselor helped me a lot with integration, but I very much questioned if I was cut out for the work during that period of time.